What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one, I'm going to break down what's going on with the market, what you should be watching for going forward. I'm going to talk about SPY, Tsla, the QQQ, and many tickers out there like Nvidia, and also break down some important things about Jerome Powell and why tomorrow is going to be a very, very important day. Because tomorrow we have Jerome Powell speaking again. So just when we thought this guy was gone, he's going to be back again. We also have lots of important data dropping that's going to affect the Fed's policies, another Fed speaker, and also some earnings, which are going to be quite significant in my opinion. So we have lots of data dropping tomorrow. I'm going to break that all down in just a few minutes and also talk about the technicals on many different stocks. But before I do anything like that, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire community as a whole. And finally, don't forget about the Moomoo link. The offer ends very soon. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks with a $100 cash reward. The offer ends in just 2 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So if you look at SPY, this thing looks like a roller coaster. This thing came down in the pre-market, dropping all the way down to 434, very close to our support. Came all the way up, very close to where resistance was, but came just short of the 438 area. Got this very, very nice pump when Powell started speaking, and then you could see the rug pull came. This was just a liquidity grab right over here and a fake out before the market came right back down very, very quickly and very sharply before it's continued to push up and got one more push up at the very end to barely close green. So quite a roller coaster. We saw the market move with quite a bit of volatility. And we saw Tesla outperform the market, hold up nicely, and many other tickers just perform this way. But why was the market performing in such a strange manner? That's because Jerome Powell was speaking, and what he said had a big effect on it. Powell basically said many important things at the ECB forum. I'm not going to break everything down in this video. I broke more details down in my second video if you're more interested in that. But if not, I'm just going to be very brief and then talk about tomorrow and why what he said is going to give us more context for tomorrow too. So basically, Powell said that the Fed is going to remain more restrictive in their policy, and there could be more rate hikes coming, potentially 2 more coming if the economy remains too strong to bring down inflation. Powell also said that inflation isn't coming down as swiftly as anticipated, but it will take time for service sector inflation to move lower. He also mentioned that the bottom line is that policy hasn't been restrictive enough for long enough as well to get to those effects. So he's basically saying that it's going to take a lot longer for us to see the true effects of the rate hikes, and it's going to require lots of time and lots of patience. So with that said, the Fed has to remain more restrictive for longer. And he said something else that's important. He said that he does not see us getting back to 2% in 2023 or 2024 for the inflation side. So for all these sources, I was listening to the report and I heard Powell say all these things. These are actually legitimate. They're not just me finding things on Twitter and talking about them. But these claims were real, and Powell is saying he does not see inflation coming down anytime soon, all the way back down to 2% or around that level. And it's going to take a while to get there, as inflation tends to be quite sticky. So it's best to be very, very patient, best to watch this out, and the Fed has to remain hawkish for quite a while in his eyes. Now, there could be a reason, okay, I'm not going to go down the conspiracy theory routes, but there could be a reason why Powell is being quite hawkish like this. Obviously, he has an intention, and he's trying very hard to slow things down. Just want to make that clear. With him saying things like this, he's going to prioritize the more hawkish perspectives during this time frame, and in doing so, it will benefit him in some way. But anyways, now let's talk about some earnings and other things like that. When it comes to earnings for Wednesday, we have Micron and BlackBerry coming out. I think BlackBerry just barely came out just a few minutes ago. And then for tomorrow, we have Paychex, Rite Aid, and then Nike. Nike is going to be the biggest one for the week, so make sure you watch that compared to all of these other earnings. Nike is going to be very interesting, so watch that for the retail side. And besides that, there's not much else coming on that's too huge. However, for tomorrow, we also have lots of data dropping that's going to be very significant, and also Powell speaking again. So the reason why I talked about Powell today is because it's evidence that Powell is being very hawkish. Like I said before, he's being hawkish, he's slowing the market down, and he's benefiting from this. Now, by doing this, okay, Powell is going to be speaking again at 11:30 p.m. today on the West Coast, which is going to be at 2:30 a.m. for the East Coast in New York time. So Powell's going to be speaking very early in the morning for tomorrow morning. And what he says could be more hawkish and may slow the market down for open for Thursday. It's just a possibility. So make sure you guys are ready for that. And on top of that, we have the GDP numbers coming out, the GDP price index, the growth rate, We also have initial jobless claims coming out, more GDP numbers and PCE expectations, and then a Fed speaker later on as the day goes on. Just remember, we have PCE data coming out for Friday, so all this is going to be very important for it. And we have to watch this all carefully, especially on the core side. But all this data dropping, especially initial jobless claims, is going to be huge for the market, so make sure you're ready for that and see how all of this affects it. The data is coming out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 1 hour before the market opens, so be ready for that and expect some volatility because of it. But until then, we're just going to have to wait and see what the market does. So on the technical side, guys, I broke down a lot of these support and resistance levels today already. I'm going to be very brief with it today. Basically, if you look at SPY, this thing is trading in a range right now. It's trying to hover above the 1 hour 50 EMA. And for now, we have support and resistance levels to watch for. If SPY tries to pump more, one of the problems I do see is there's a possible head and shoulders that the bears are going to be arguing is existent, but there's no guarantee of confirmation of this playing out unless something bad happens with the GDP numbers, unless something bad happens with Jerome Powell speaking. So be very careful. This is a possibility, but not a guarantee. I also want to add that when it comes to the way we open, we could see the market gap down because of Powell. So be very careful because of that. The market may slow down in the morning because of Powell and all the numbers coming out. And then it could pump later on, but that's not a guarantee. It's going to depend on a lot of different factors. But until then, let's now just talk about these numbers. If the market kind of gaps down just a little bit, we're going to be watching this support at the 434 area. That's the next major support below 435. If that breaks, watch the 433s, which is where our 200 EMA is. If that breaks, it's going to come all the way down to the lower 430s, all the way down to these levels. Now, could this be a head and shoulders that's forming like right here? It's a possibility, not a guarantee though. Just a possibility. These don't always play out. So just be careful. Just keep that in the back of your mind just to be safe. And then finally, if we start pushing, let's just say we like gap down because of Powell, but then we start pushing up again. If it breaks above 436.64 around that area, if it manages to break that, it's going to likely try to push and make an attempt for 438. But also remember that we have this like unfilled gap all the way down around 439. So like right up here, there's a good chance the market may make an attempt to get there. And you could argue that on the bigger time frame, there's like an inverse head and shoulders forming. Maybe the market's going to start uptrending. Maybe Tesla's going to play a role in causing that. So there's both a bull and bear case that are existent. I'm not going to pick any sides right now because the market is going to be responding to data. I just don't know what the data is going to cause, and also Jerome Powell for tomorrow. So look at both the bull and bear cases. The bears are going to say there's a head and shoulders and there's like the support here. The bulls are going to say that, oh, this is looking like an inverse head and shoulders and the market's going to just keep pumping very soon. Could be either one of them. I think that this inverse head and shoulders has some convincing looking setups right now. Especially because of this unfilled gap up here. But just to be safe, we're going to wait and see what Powell says. We're going to wait and see what the GDP numbers look like. And we're going to wait and see what PCE causes for Friday. So watch support and resistance. Be very, very careful. For Tesla, if you're bullish on Tesla, you want to see this thing break and hold at 260. That's going to be the next major resistance. If it breaks down, it could fly a lot more. If it breaks down, you're going to be watching major support. It has some support at the mid at 250s. I did list these specific levels earlier. So basically on my 5-minute chart, I have like the specific levels like 255 and then like 254.26 as support, followed by like, all these different levels. But just for now, I'm just going to try to keep this video more simple. If you want to see them, you could just go to my previous video. Basically, it's all the same. So you could watch all these different levels specifically. If it breaks like 2.5, you're going to be watching like 250, for instance. But basically, the bigger levels are just this. If you look at like the 1 hour time frame on Tesla, basically, there's a possible inverse head and shoulders forming on Tesla. But for it to turn bullish, you need to break and hold above 260. If it breaks below the previous low of the day today, you're going to be watching this thing retest 252.5 to potentially 250. If that breaks, Tesla could come down to the mid 240s. So it's all a matter of which way does it go. My prediction is Tesla may cool off because of Powell. Okay, it could happen, but I think Tesla's going to eventually rebound and start pushing as we approach Friday because of the fact that we have so much data dropping. Over the weekend, we have lots of anticipation of strong data for Tesla for deliveries. I think there's a good chance it's going to do well as the news is turning more bullish. And we have a potential accumulation here, a cup and handle like formation, and inverse head and shoulders all forming at the same time. So I'm leaning more bullish on Tesla. It could cool off a little bit in the morning because of Powell and then just start pushing anyways. There's an unfilled gap all the way up here at 265. There's an imbalance up here at 275. Could make its way all the way up to those levels. It is a possibility. It took Tesla only like 2 to 3 days to go from 280 all the way down to like the 250s, almost 240s. It took just a couple of days. So it could drop fast. It could also pump very quickly. So just be ready. But I am leaning more bullish for Friday close for Tesla. I think it's going to pump more. Could cool off a little bit tomorrow morning and then start pumping. I'm still leaning in that direction. For AMD, all right, for AMD, this thing is still kind of stuck. If it wants to turn more bullish, it needs to continue to hold this level. If it breaks above this 112.5 area, you're going to be watching this 114. If it breaks below 109, I think on the 30-minute time frame, this is a little bit more clear. If it breaks below like 109.22 on the 50 EMA, it's going to come all the way back down to 108, then 105 potentially. So watch which way it breaks above the 200 or the 50. If it gets above this 112 area, it could start pushing more. If it breaks below 109, it has some downside. NEO is actually holding up very nicely, but what does worry me is it is forming a slight bearish divergence. It may cool off just a tiny bit tomorrow, but then after deliveries come out or as it approaches deliveries, it may start pumping more. So NEO is going to be on my radar just to be safe. For Netflix, this thing may cool off to this like 425 area. It's currently at 429. If it continues to bounce off this 50 EMA, maybe it's going to approach the high 420 527 area, maybe around there. May cool off just a little bit more and then start bouncing and start pushing later on. It's still holding up very nicely. I'm not still seeing much else going on with it. If it wants to turn bullish, if it holds above this 430 area, it could push all the way back up to the high of the day, make its way closer to 440. That's the next important level. If it breaks down, because of Powell, it could gap down because of Powell and come back down to this 50 EMA at 425, if not a little lower. And there's this imbalance down here. So I'm going to be eyeing this like 425 to 423 area. It may come down because of Powell, then bounce intraday. But if it does, you're going to be watching 425, 423, 420, and all the way back down to like 416 if it breaks below 420. So watch those levels carefully. Anyways, when it comes to the QQQ, this is holding above the 50 EMA on the 30-minute time frame. If it wants to turn bullish, we need to see this break above 364.69. If it manages to do that, watch 366, the entire zone up there. If it breaks that, you're going to be watching 368 and 370. If it breaks down, you're going to be watching 364, 363 flat. If it breaks below 363, there's a good chance it's going to come down to the lower 360s, around like 362 and 360. So watch all of those support and resistance levels. It is hovering above the 50 EMA at the time I'm recording this, so I'm hoping it does continue to hold, but a break below it would be a bearish signal. For now, it hasn't really done that. It's been holding above it for quite a while. So watch that carefully. What do I think is going to happen? It may gap down because of Powell, get an intraday bounce off the data, and then we'll just have to see what the data tells us to be more certain. But I do think Powell could slow us down a little bit as the guy's been very hawkish lately. Same thing with the NASDAQ. Whatever I said about the QQQ could translate to the NASDAQ. It's holding above the 30-minute 50 EMA. If you look at SPX, same thing, is trying to hold above the 50 EMA. It's just barely closed red, down 0.04%. But it does have the potential to push up to this like imbalance level, all the way up to this like 4381 area. There's also that unfilled gap at 4400, like way up here. Didn't actually fill this gap just yet. Came close, but hasn't actually done it. So we're just going to be watching it very carefully. I think it's actually like up here at 4400. So it came close, but it didn't actually fill the gap. That's right here. If anything, I think there's a good chance this could be forming an inverse head and shoulders and start pushing up later. But for confirmation, we need to see this thing break above the high of the day from today. Now, if this thing breaks down, a break below the 50 EMA is going to be confirmation. So watch that carefully on the 30 minutes time frame. The dollar is up today, which shows manipulation. Typically, when the dollar is up, the market should cool off. The market's still held up, showing some resilience. If you look at the VIX, this thing is coming down. It actually had that gap I was talking about in one of my earlier videos. It came down to fill this gap. So now that it filled the gap, it's going to bounce a little bit. It's turned bullish on the VIX. It needs to actually break above 13.7 and potentially make its way back up to 15. But so far, it hasn't done that. It's still looking kind of weak, so there's no confirmation. So I can't really say much about it. You could argue there's a possible like inverse head and shoulder formation, but it's not a guarantee. It's still looking kind of weak, so I'm not really counting on that to play out. For Coinbase, if this thing wants to be bullish, I mean, it's already looking quite bullish in my opinion. I have my drawings like right here. It tried to break above 75. It may cool off in the morning and make its way down to the next support at 66. It could drop a little bit because of Powell. It's just a possibility. By the time we open tomorrow, the 50 EMA may be closer to like 68 or so. So it could try to bounce like in the very, very high 60s and then try to continue pushing. And the next resistance is going to be around this like 75 area, and then after that, it's going to likely make its way up to about 77.5, then potentially all the way up to about this 80 area. I'm going to be watching that first. Those are going to be some important levels that I was eyeing earlier, and has potential to push up more. But first, we could cool off because the Powell then start pushing. We'll have to wait and see on that. For Alibaba, I mean, this thing came down, and I was predicting this thing could have some downside in my video from yesterday. I was hoping, though, that this thing could form kind of like this possible inverse head and shoulder structure. Instead, it came down even harder due to some more restrictions in China. What I'm seeing now is still looking bearish right now. We're going to be watching if 84 holds. If that fails to hold, the next level to really watch for is going to be a lot closer to where this imbalance is, around like the very mid 83s. And if those fail us, if 83 fails us, I mean, it's going to make its way down closer to 80. So we got to be careful here. You could argue that there's a head and shoulders like pattern that's forming on it, and this thing is just going to start downtrending. It's a possibility, but for confirmation, watch a break below 84. If it wants to bounce off some potentially good piece of news, just hypothetically, because you could argue that there's a potential divergence. It's not really looking that strong, though. I'm not really seeing it, but it's a possibility, right? You can't rule this out. If it wants to turn bullish, watch 86, then 86.68. There's a gap up here in the 86s. Then you're going to be watching 87.62. For now, it's just looking weak, so I don't really see that playing out. So just be careful and watch support and resistance. Aapl has resistance at 190, a very strong resistance there. If it breaks that, I'm going to be watching this thing get closer to the next psychological level at like 192.5. That's going to be the next level if it does break. But not a guarantee because it is fighting some relatively strong resistance at the time I am recording this. If Aapl breaks down, watch 188.5 as support, 187.5, which is exactly where the 50 EMA is, 186.5, and then 186. I think it may slow down a little bit because of Powell, because the 1 hour is starting to show some weakening momentum, but then it could start to push up intraday as time goes on and retest 190. It is a possibility by Friday, but just be careful just to be safe. For Nvidia, this thing is at 411 at the time I'm recording this. I think I have to switch to the 30-minute time frame. On the 30-minute, it's just below the 50 EMA. It's just sandwiched between the 50 and the 200. If it breaks below the 50 because of bad news tomorrow, because of Powell or something, it's going to likely sink all the way down to like the 405 area. And if that fails us, then watch 401. If the opposite happens and it bounces, you're going to be watching resistance around this 416 area. If it breaks that, watch this thing get closer to about 418 and potentially 420. I'm in the middle with Nvidia. It is kind of stuck going back and forth between these two EMAs. Whichever one breaks is likely going to determine which direction this thing goes in. It's also going to depend on Powell, so just be careful with what Powell says in the data that's dropping. For Google, it broke above the 200 EMA, which is a decent sign. If it holds above this, it has the potential to push all the way back up to about the 22 level up here. So this zone like right up here around this 22.8 to about 23 level. It has a lot of potential to do so if it manages to hold this level. But it's not a confirmation just yet because it barely broke this in the after hours, because Jerome Powell is going to be speaking. We don't know what the guy's about to say, so just be careful. There's also a bearish divergence right here. I think it may cool off a bit, but then if it makes its way back up, then it could finally get the confirmation for the breakout. But it's not confirmed yet. It is showing some strength and with the potential bullish triangle, but I don't have enough confirmation to turn really bullish because we're waiting on Powell. If it breaks down, watch 121 as support, 119.8, 117.6 after that, and other important levels. All right, so I just want to make that as clear as possible. For Amazon, if this thing wants to turn bullish, you want to see this thing break above the 50 EMA. It's kind of stuck around it, this 129.29 level. If it breaks that, watch this thing fly up to about 130.84. If it breaks that, watch this thing get closer to about 132.6. If it fails to do so, because you could argue there's a possible like head and shoulders developing, not a guarantee though, just a possibility. If it breaks down, you're going to be watching this level to become, if it gets above the 50, it could become support as well. 128.32, 127 flats, then we have 125 after that as well, all the way down here. So I'd be careful with Amazon because of that. Could this be like a double top and a rejection? That's a possibility. For confirmation of this break to the downside, it needs to break below 127. And if that's the case, there's this imbalance down here at 125. So that's going to be your confirmation for a bearish move. You're going to be watching these levels carefully and just watch it very, very closely. Be very, very patient with it. If it tries to break out, don't forget the resistance levels I just talked about and support. It is stuck right now between these two EMAs. We don't have any confirmation of it breaking just yet. And the reason why I'm still so open-minded is because of Powell. I don't know what he's going to say. I don't know what the data is going to drop for tomorrow. So we're just going to have to wait and see, and then be prepared for lots of volatility. See which way it breaks and watch your EMAs carefully on the 30-minute time frame. Same thing with Meta. If this thing wants to turn bearish, I mean, there's a bearish divergence right here that's starting to play out, but it's not a guarantee. It's starting to fight the 50 EMA. If it's bullish, first off, let's just talk about the bullish case. If it holds above this 285 level, watch 287.5. Then after that, watch 290. If it breaks 290, this thing can start flying and get closer to 300. If it gets rejected off this, you're going to be watching support at 283. If that fails us, watch this thing get closer all the way down to where this imbalance is, around this 279 area. It is forming a bearish divergence, so there's a chance it could reject and start coming down, but it's just a possibility, not a guarantee. I also want to add that on the 4-hour time frame, this thing is still above where the EMA is. So if it does go down to this like gap area or where it was before, it could break just temporarily below the 50 and bounce right back up. So that is a possibility because of this unfilled area, and also because of that imbalance. Now, also remember that this thing tends to hover above the 50 EMA. There were some instances where it broke below it, so I wouldn't be surprised if it does come down just temporarily, then bounces. But it's just a possibility. So what am I seeing for Meta? Basically, this is above the 50, okay? If you're bearish on it, you're going to be saying that you're going to see it break below the 50 at 284. If that happens, the next important level is going to be around this mid 281 area. If that breaks, then there's that imbalance down here, right over here around this lower level around the 79 area. You're going to be watching 79 as the next support. And it could bounce very sharply if it does come down all the way there. And if you're bullish, don't forget 287, then 290 after that. So watch all of these support and resistance levels. There's a good chance it may slow down because of Powell speaking. And then also it depends on the data coming out in the morning. And if the data helps the market pump, it could turn bullish. If not, we'll just have to wait and see. Until then, get ready for initial jobless claims, get ready for Powell speaking tomorrow morning, and get ready for all these different things coming out for the markets. It's all going to be very important, so please be patient and please be ready. With that said, thank you for listening. Have a great day, everyone. Market to the moon as the long term is still incredibly bright, and peace out.